Hello humans, my name is Scrubjack0 and today I want to share with you the story of my very first adventure in Dungeons & Dragons. This will take some time, so I will split this into a few videos. So, what we have here is a cautionary tale, yet one I will never forget. A story of youth, adventure, a few glorious triumphs, and a great many spectacular failures. This is my first D&D story. Alright, before we get to the good part, for all of you who aren't familiar with D&D or Dungeons & Dragons, I'm gonna make an attempt at an explanation of the game. Bear with me. It's a lot to take in and admittingly hard to describe. But we're gonna give it a try. So, D&D is a role-playing game meant to be played by a group of people, usually at a table. One player, designated the Dungeon Master or the Game Master, DM or GM for short, controls the world and all that inhabits it. They do this so the rest of the players have an environment to interact with. It is a huge responsibility. You have to know fictional geography, economy, history, create hundreds of people, learn about mythical creatures and control them. It's crazy, but rewarding. The rest of the players control a character in the story, one of their own creation, their story. While playing, you decide what they do, how they act, what they say. Every aspect of their life is your choice. You think as them, and in the game, you are them. It's an experience unlike anything else. It's like a movie or a video game, but you are the main character. When the player's characters attempt certain actions, their success is determined by dice rolls. Basically, anything you try to do, fighting, negotiating, problem solving, can all be decided by a dice roll. It's a wonderful system to represent the randomness of life, and oh boy, is it amazing when the dice are with you. But it never fails. The dice will eventually turn on you. And this is where the aforementioned spectacular failures come from. I could go on all day about D&D. It's become a pretty big part of who I am. It's also very hard to describe. My hope making this video is that maybe, just maybe, this story will inspire you to give it a try as well. So, the story of this game starts way back when I was about 14 years old, give or take. My best friend's uncle had played D&D since the 80s and offered to DM a game for us. We had never played before, but were way into other nerdy stuff, so of course we were excited for this. We made our characters our avatars of heroism. We just knew we were going to be legendary. My friend created Kime the Ranger, and I made Edward the Rogue. Kime and Edward were not much more than kids, just starting out. Much like ourselves, they're players. We set out from humble beginnings on neighboring farms towards the nearest town to find quests, wealth, adventure, fame, and glory. Starting off, things were mostly just walking. Young Ed and Kime had heard stories of the dangers of the world, but never seen them firsthand. Monsters, bandits, and the like. They were ready for anything, always on guard. On the last day of their journey, at dusk, not so far outside of the town that was their goal, they were ambushed. It finally happened, their first battle. They were set upon by a band of orcs, large, physically imposing, green-skinned humanoid creatures. A pretty common fantasy enemy. My friend and I knew that our young heroes could handle orcs no problem, so we charged in boldly to meet our adversaries in combat. Kime loosed an arrow from his bow as Edward drew his dagger and short sword and rushed in. The specifics of the battle elude me. What I will never forget is how it ended. Before long, we realized that the orcs were more formidable than we had thought. And this was before we became aware of their leader, an Orog, which is an even larger orc. Think Alpha Orc. Ed and Kym were surrounded, and it was only a matter of time before they were defeated, which here meant death. Their journey was going to end before it even began. They would never be heroes. No one would even remember their names. How did things get so bleak so early on? Putting everything he had into one last all-out attack, Edward lashed out with his short sword. At the table, I rolled a 20-sided die to determine how successful the onslaught was. This is where things went horribly wrong. The result was a 1 out of 20, a critical failure. Our dungeon master had a custom table for dealing with critical failures and critical successes. A 1 and 20 respectively on the 20-sided die, or D20. His custom system, upon rolling a 1 or 20, required us to roll percentage dice, which generated a random number between 1 and 100, which determined what happened with the critical roll. The higher the percentage, the crazier the result, with high numbers on critical hits dealing 9 times damage, or dismemberment up to decapitation, while high numbers on critical failures yield horrible slapstick mistakes resulting in damage to you and your surroundings. In this instance, my all-out desperation attack became Ed throwing his short sword on accident and impaling Kym with it, killing him instantly. His only friend, dead, because of him. As far as screwing up in this situation goes, you can't get much worse than that. The only saving grace here is that the band of orc raiders stopped attacking because they were too busy laughing at us. Laughing at me. Laughing at Edward. So Edward took the only chance he had, dropped his weapons, grabbed Kym, and ran for it, dragging him. The orcs didn't even bother chasing. They were too busy laughing and had essentially already gotten all of our valuables anyway. After dragging Kym's body a few miles, Ed made it to the church on the outside of town. After begging the priest, Ed managed to convince him to resurrect Kym. Kym, now freshly revived, with his last memory being killed by his friend, who didn't look too far from death himself, was understandably disgruntled. The kicker of the whole situation is that these two young adventurers now had no money or weapons. But what they did have was a staggering amount of debt to the church. Hey, miracles ain't cheap. With no other choice, the two began working around town to absolve their debt. They spent about a month washing dishes, cleaning stables, and doing general odd jobs around the town. It certainly wasn't the adventure they expected, but at least they were both alive. Strangely enough, this adventure game had become Villager Simulator for a while. But this is far from where the story ends. And for those of you who want to hear the rest, it's a wild ride. I will continue this tale for you lovely people in episode 2. This is Scrubjack Zero saying thanks for watching, and see you next time.